In many Western paradigms, the ocean is something that separates us, but for us, it's something that connects us.
I'd like to see our people get back to the roots, to the land, to the sea, to the hunting.
Because I think passion actually drives you to do things. If you have the heart for the people, it's the only way that will keep you going, because you have the love and respect and honor those that you touch.
We're a small little NGO that can, and we can do it because we work in partnership with a whole bunch of other amazing organizations, and what we're able to do is put together magic.
As specific people, wherever we go, all over the world, there's in the back in our head, back in our mind, and never forget who we are.
The Songhees Islands is going to be a focal point for global climate change and sea level rise, and it's important we understand what the impacts are out there.
We're very small islands in many islands in the Pacific, but when it comes to time to extend our hand to help, we love the idea of holding hands together and see what we can come up with.
Welcome to the Indigenous Voice. Today is the 31st of August, and we are so happy to have with us April Ingham, the Executive Director of Pacific People Partnership with Muavae Va'a. Am I saying that right? Perfect. The President of the PPP also. Glad to have you with us here.
Thank you.
In the beginning, we started by seeing a little video, and it's around like 2 minutes. And April, would you please tell us about this video to start in the beginning?
I'd be pleased to tell you a little bit about that video. That video really speaks to who we are. It talks about our values. It talks about the importance of respect, the importance of partnership, and working together across the ocean with our partners and friends and families in the South Pacific and here. And what's really special about that video is that it was filmed by young Indigenous filmmakers here in Victoria in part, through a partnership that we created with MediaNet and also with the First Peoples Cultural Council. It was partially funding that as well. And so it was bits and pieces of some of the programming that we've done over many years, put together and kind of, you know, showing who we are in such a great way. And the music, for instance, that's behind that beautiful film was created, or it was part of our opening ceremony of our Pacific Networking Conference in 2015. And it was a beautiful melody that came from the Cook Islands area. So we were so pleased to have an artistic collaboration between artists from the South Pacific and artists from here in Canada who all contributed to that video, some of which are emerging and some of which are established artists working together in partnership, and also with local filmmakers here, like Gumboot Productions. And you know, it's wonderful to have such great local support and to help bring people together to create such a simple film, but one with so much more meaning. So thank you, yes.
Oh, thanks. It's 2 minutes, but it's very, very nicely done and bring a lot of information. Moab, I know you are married from an Indigenous person.
Before I talk a little bit about my background, I would just like to give a little bit of just greetings from me and my families, and also because I'm also living in a community. We have a Pacific Islander community in Victoria's. So I think it's culturally it's important to kind of also recognize who they are, because as Pacific Islands, we always like to honor those are part of who we are as communities. So by saying that, I say in my language, for those who watch, privileged to see this interview, I want to greet you by saying talo falava, To our other islands, we also say Malolele, Kiorana, Bulavinaka, Noia. These are all greetings words that many of us live here. We will normally say to someone, especially within our community or even in Victoria. So anyway, that's just a little bit of a greetings word from my people and here. But a bit of a background for me, I'm a Samoan, born and raised in a little village called Lotopue, where I spent most of my life growing and learning from my family, my parents, my elders, and witness the life of what the village, usually we as a people, growing up in the village. So everything's about the foods and everything about cultures is right there in the community. So that's, you know, many years later, I traveled, I have a chance to connect with other organizations and met my wife in Cook Islands. My wife's from here in Saanich. She was born and raised in Tsartlip community, it's a First Nations. In 1992, we got married, and so we raised families of three. Our oldest son's 22, and the second son is 18, and my daughter, Benina, she is 15. My oldest son's named Tua, and my second son is Alexander. So, and my wife's Marie Va'a. So that's a bit of a background that I have here in Canada. So of course, always love to be involved and be of support of anything to do with Pacific Islanders here. So that's where we connect with April.
But also you are in dancing.
Right.
You have very specialty here also.
Yeah, our community in Victoria, there's a lot of dancer here in our Pacific Islander community. Here we've had also musicians. They're a great singer. We do have a group called the Trade Winds, and that is really focused on the music. They're incredible singers and all Pacific Islander style of music. So, and then we have a dance group which I usually lead the group for. We've been together now for almost 20 years. It's called the Pearl of the South Pacific. So many of the dancers are from different islands. So when we do, we get invited to many different events to perform. So we do performing, we do dances like from wherever we're from, you know, we're from dances like Samoan dance, with Fijian dance, Rotuman dance, with, you know, all kind of dances that can be part of this community. That's really kind of one of my main dreams, and you know, I wanted to share that our generations, as they continue to, you know, our second generation, third generation will come and continue to maintain who they are, and maybe some of the music and dance will also make them feel like they are part of who we are and continue to carry on that. So
great.
Yeah.
But before going ahead in the subject, April, please, if you tell us a little bit about the background of PPP, and later I'd like to talk more about what you do and the upcoming festival you have.
Okay.
But a little bit background first.
Thank you. Well, I must say it's a pleasure to be here today, and also to represent such an amazing organization. Pacific Peoples Partnership has been around for 41 years now. We've been guests on the Coast Salish territories this whole time, and we're very grateful for that. And there's many powerful lessons that have come from that, and from many of the different community members that we've had the fortune to get to know and to learn from. But it's a remarkable organization. The roots started back in the days of nuclear testing, and it was important that the world took a stand against nuclear testing, and Canada was also part of that. And it was in part through our organization, and that's why we were created, was to have a voice for Canada, to speak against the policies that were taking place, and the injustices against the environment and the peoples of the South Pacific, in the days of nuclear testing. So I'm happy to say we were very successful on that front, and we carried forward some really powerful messages and policies and educational programs against nuclear testing for many years. But the social justice was the heart of who we are and why we exist, and it was through that we became more closely involved with Indigenous concerns here in Canada as well as in the South Pacific. And it was, I think that's probably what really attracted me to this organization, is the facilitation that it does in connecting people north-south for knowledge exchange. So our programs have shifted and changed over the years, but they've always been centered around Indigenous issues, especially around well, climate change, environmental concerns, human rights, and social justice. So we're doing lots of innovative work, have been for 41 years.
I wonder, how come always Indigenous community are leading on a fight for issue like environment? It's really, is it because more they are organically connected to the land, to the environment, and now the new way we live in, which brought by the Western kind of, let's say, society, it kind of take us away from that base?
I know that Mua can answer this really nicely, but from my perspective, I can say, as a person that is of really mixed heritage, that doesn't know my own roots, that snip that happened that disconnected me from the land, that has always hurt my soul. So having the opportunity to work for an organization that is working on behalf of Indigenous peoples and with Indigenous peoples, that's where it's at for me. And I do believe strongly that there is a soulful connection to the land and environment. Mua?
Yeah, that's very true. To our people, they're very similar. The cultural-wise, they're very similar to the Indigenous people. They've been through a lot, and it's the same with us, the Pacific Islander too as well. So there's a lot of connection when it comes to land issue, rivers and oceans. So April mentioned about the climate change and stuff like that happen. That has the effect on many of the Pacific Islander islands right now. It's pretty bad, and then so I think there's a lot of us that when we see issue like this, it really kind of connect us, because no matter how far we're from where we're all born in the island, but no matter where we go around the world, we'll never take that away, that special place in our heart where we were born and raised, where our islands, and even our own children's, even though they were born here, but there was a piece of them connect them to the islands, and I want to make sure in my heart that my children will always have that place for them in the islands. So they go and see this is where they connect, this is where they tie them into who I am, to the land, to the culture of our people. And I think many of us Pacific Islanders that live here feel the same thing, that they connect at home. So here in Victoria, there's a number of us here, but there's anything happen at home, we're just talking about trying to figure out how we can be of support to one of our islands back home that was hit by the hurricanes. And so it had an effect on us here, and we're going to do whatever we can take to have support and help and raise funds to support and build and help what's needed there. So, and I think later on probably April will talk about that. But that's what connects us to the land, because of where we're from. And so here, very similar with Indigenous people here in Canada. We share a lot of story. We share similar story. We share kind of food where we love get together when there's food. And many of our Indigenous people similar, because that's where family draw together, and sharing songs and stories. Those are the stuff that you grew up in a village, learning those stuff. So.
By the way, you have a very unique situation, as in not just you work on the bonding between both Indigenous community, whether here or in your homeland, but I'm sure you have a feeling like you are also like around your family here as well, because I really I am only a guest here, so good for you. Actually, you are doing your work and your way of life are going in the same line, which is wonderful to have. April, I wrote something. It's just which is talking about the same issue Mua was talking about. In your website, you say the BPP strongly believe that Indigenous peoples ultimately hold the answers and solution to the challenges faced within their community. I 100% agree, but would you please tell us more about that. Explain
Okay.
something about.
I'll give you an example, but this is an operating principle and a value that has held true for our organization for, well, I can say 4 generations. An example that I'd like to share is in West Papua, for instance. In West Papua, this is an area of extreme human rights abuses against the Indigenous peoples there. It's an area of extreme neglect for health concerns and health issues, and an area where women's issues are not raised. And so how we approached our work is we spend time and get to know the community. We get to spend time and understand who their leaders are, who their community members are, what are the issues that are central to their, to their communities, and then we work with them to find solutions and to help to bring some of the tools to task that they may need, because the solutions are there in the communities. They know what will work for their communities. Satelliting in and bringing seeds from countries that don't belong there and creating false economic projects that have no future, that's not what we're about. We're about partnerships, we're about making things real, and we started the community. And going back to that example, in West Papua, we did some very significant work. We're one of the only NGOs in the world that was successful getting in there and working there because of the restrictions on foreign engagement. And some of the work that was done there through my colleague Todd Bitterman and Jenny Monroe was looking at Indigenous-led responses to HIV and AIDS. Now, that's absolutely critical because it's one of the highest rates in Indonesia is in West Papua because of the neglect I talked about. But the solutions being satellited in from other places don't always work. And so it was important to get in touch with the community and provide a space for the community's professionals, leaders, and health professionals to come together and to talk about what's appropriate for the Indigenous Papuan peoples. And so that's how we approach our work.
Right.
It's, and it takes more time to do work like that. It's not immediate. That's why I talked at the beginning about process. Process is part of how we do our work.
Yeah, especially when these issues and troubles come from the outside.
Yeah.
And then later you want to bring solution from the outside. It's kind of
Doesn't always
adding
work.
a layer of above another layer of.
Yeah.
Yes. So what about the festival, the upcoming festival? If you tell us about.
Yeah, thank you. The work we do in development in the South Pacific is really important. But the work we do here in Canada with public engagement and hoping to get the imagination, the heart, and the commitment of our fellow Canadians in fighting for some of these common issues that affect all of us. This climate change is affecting all of us. And, highlighting our friends in the South Pacific and Indigenous peoples here. We have a 2-day festival, and it's geared around youth and families and getting people together to celebrate Pacific arts and culture, but to look at those serious issues as well around climate change and our own responsibilities as stewards of this environment. So One Wave Festival, it's in its 9th year now. It's happening on September 10th and 11th. And this year is really exciting. It's our 9th annual. Muavae's group is going to be performing, and so is a number of amazing, groups. Like it's just we'll have a poster. We're going to show that to you. But there's lots of great performers, and we're also really happy to have a solid representation from Esquimalt and Songhees nations, and many guest artists and speakers, local NGOs that are involved in environmental stewardship, Indigenous artists that are upcycling and recycling, and also kids family area, touch tanks from our friends at World Water Trust. And it's fantastic because the community comes together. It's happening next Saturday, 12 till 6 p.m. In Centennial Square, which is right downtown Victoria. And the festival itself is exciting. We have usually about 1,000 people come through in the course of a day. But what we're really excited about is day 2 of our festival on September 11th. We are going to be live streaming, live broadcasting, basically a television show that is going to remotely connect us to Samoa, Fiji, New Zealand, Bella Bella, and here as a live stream audience in Victoria. And the reason we're doing this is that we are trying to pilot and utilize technologies that will allow us to better connect with our friends in the South Pacific. So we're really excited, to pilot that.
Yeah, this is very important subject, the connection between indigenous community themselves, because they are kind of fragmented and thrown in separate pockets without any communication.
Yeah.
And now, like, more you are familiar with the situation in the schools here among the indigenous community, and about in Samoa, in your homeland. Is there any similarities about?
Yeah, there is. I mean, there's always. I just read the stories at home. I saw it on the road and went on the internet and read the story about the Samoan, how the school and the challenge that they face. One of the story that was one of the couples shared their story about dealing with some of the issues with families that they're facing. A lot of that to do with the ability to come up with a way to support the family, so they're not getting the need, they're not getting the help they get, especially when it comes to school. There's a lot of also the influence of Westerner in terms of the music and technology, which is all good. There's a lot of positive stuff, but there are also some are not so good stuff that come in at the struggle that they face dealing with the social medias and stuff. And that's the same thing here too as well in the school. I work a lot with First Nations in a community youth. I work for the Tsartlip community. I help quite a bit with our own young people to try and deal with some of the issue that they struggle with. But most of majority of the things that I see, that there's always a willingness and openness to make changes. Although there's a challenge that they face, but there's always a willingness to work hard to kind of bring some solution to some of the issue that. And I think I think April mentioned earlier when it comes to social justice. There were some of the stuff similar happen at home too. The violence against women at homes and violence against women and children is one huge thing that we still struggle at home. And I think this is one of the things that attracted me to the organization when I was first approached. I don't know how many years ago, because I see myself in the organization, and for years I've always tried to kind of an outsider looking where I can fit in an organization, and at the same time learning about what's going on at home and what's going on here in my community, here in Saanich area, where I've quite been involved with my people there, with my wife. So PPP was a kind of an organization. I look and I see there's such a incredible, important part that they're playing to kind of connect us and come up with a way to recognize what's going on at home and indigenous people here, and raise the awareness within the community here, and come up with a way how can we help, how we can support certain issue that is arising in the community. And I think for me that was one of the most exciting thing for me. Is be able to get in and be involved. In the South Pacific, there is 3 main people group in the South Pacific. That's Melanesian, Micronesian, and Polynesians. And one of the things that April and I have been talking a lot about that over the year was how do we expand our work to make sure that we cover all 3 people group in the Pacific, include our indigenous people in North America, all around the world, or whatever we can to be of support. So the PPP organization's got incredible work that they do, and I think there's a lot to need to go, to see that established. But I'm excited about things that are coming as we work through certain issues. So I think that's, to me, it's very rewarding to recognize that they were taking one step at a time.
Okay, we have left a minute or two, but there is a very important question. It's very dear to me, the subject of language. And you seem a proud person of your native language. We started in the beginning. We have a struggle here about reviving the language. Do you have the same issue in your homeland as well?
Yes, we do. But there's a change now. There's a lot of people now are beginning to working more to within the language in the country. There's always, you speak the language every day, but a lot of also live overseas. There I see a lot of, like in New Zealand, Australia, they have successfully started to learn and running school to continue to teach the language. So language is very, very important to us. There's a way of, we're reading a book, you can actually, I guess that's one of the things about technology. Now you can get everything online.
Yes.
So you can go into the Google and you can see certain, you can learn from it. And I think that's the, I guess this technology we're today, but language is one of the biggest thing for us that we hold on to. We lose the language, we're pretty much done for us. So it's important for us to dear to our heart because it's something that was given to us.
It's amazing how it's the same issue everywhere. April, just a reminder again about the festival.
Yes.
And if you, last word you want to say about that, please.
Well, yes. Well, we're just really excited about our festival this year, and kudos to the committee that put it together underneath Kat Zimmer. September 10th and 11th, so it's Saturday and Sunday. I guess this coming weekend is when it'll be airing. And yes, so we would just invite everybody to come out. It's family friendly, it's free, 12 to 6, Centennial Square, and be there for the opening ceremonies and celebrate with us, and and then join us Sunday on live stream. If you check out our website, you will be able to find the details of where to log in, and you can see what's going on live and be part of a world's first broadcast event.
Great. I'm sure also we'll follow up on the subject in upcoming shows. Thanks a lot, April, and Moa, thanks a lot for coming for the show. Thanks for watching this part of Indigenous Voice, and I would like to say thanks also for the volunteer and Shaw TV for making this show possible. Thanks. Welcome back to this segment of Indigenous Voice, and we are really happy to have with us Bernice Smith and Angel Henry. Bernice is from the Tsartlip First Nation and Angel from the Pauquachin First Nation. And today we are going to talk about a project being done called Heliset Hale. It's about a rally run to prevent suicide. So Bernice, first let's start. Would you please tell us a little bit about this project, when it started and why?
The original run began in May 2013, and there was 3 runners, Kelly Paul, who is the founder of Heliset Hale, John Sampson and myself, and we started in Port Hardy and ran down to Victoria, and it was a period of over 21 days. Kelly Paul is the founder of Heliset Hale. It was her dream to run Vancouver Island, and she had lost her brother Isaac Paul to suicide, so she put the two together to make it a healing journey for Vancouver Island.
Angel, when did you start to participate in this project?
I was asked back in June to join the team this year for September's run.
Okay. Now the question, why? Tell us about the goal. What is the message behind that project?
The message for Heliset Hale is to bring a healing to the First Nations communities of Vancouver Island from the north to the south, and to share the message of hope and light, as well as to bring about community resources in the each First Nations that we visit, so that if there is anybody that has suicidal thoughts or anybody that's suffering depression, that they know who their resource people are in their communities.
So when you have a specific like steps to do when you go to every community, you do a specific things, and
we have a map that outlays the route, and for the first 2 days this year is a lot of running from Port Hardy to Tsawout, and then once we go from Tsawout to Camel River, we'll increase with First Nations visits. And usually when we run into a community, there will be a welcome either from leadership or elders to welcome the runners into the community, and followed by some encouraging and supportive words, as well as maybe a healing circle. Drumming and singing as well is also a part of the welcoming into the First Nations communities.
What did you have? What do you think about this experience in general? Through your experience in last year, what do you think?
I feel really honored to be a part of the team, to join. For myself, as a teenager, I had a friend who committed suicide, and so for me, I feel it's very important to bring a message to each of the communities that we go into, for the youth or anyone who has suicidal thoughts, and just to know that there is somewhere where they can go and someone to talk to, and that, yeah.
And especially you have a kid yourself.
Yes, I have.
Is he running, also participating in that?
He probably will join here and there when he can, yeah.
You mentioned the encouragement from the leadership and the elders. Would you please tell us more about that? Especially yesterday I visited the Pauquachin First Nation, and I was honored to meet Chief Rebecca Harris. And I'm sure she has a big role in the whole project.
She does. Actually, it was only a few weeks ago that she hosted a traditional stick game in Tsartlip, and all her proceeds from that cultural activity were donated to Heliset Hale, and it was a really big contribution, which we're so very thankful for. Putting together a run like this can get very costly with vehicles and gas and accommodation and the runners' meals. We're very proud that Pauquachin will be hosting the homecoming on September 25th, so really looking forward to what Chief Rebecca has planned for the runners.
Now, about youth, I'm sure they are participating in the project. Would you tell us about that?
3 years ago, when we ran it, when we'd run into the First Nations communities, we'd often get some supportive runners that would run a leg with us or run a few kilometers with us, and hoping to increase that for the youth. I believe it's very important that the youth have active action as well in this message. We hear the teachings from our elders, but we'd also like our youth to be present and to take part, to participate, and to make it a stronger journey.
Just not to forget the elephant in the room and to talk about suicide itself. I'm sure people need to be educated about the condition that lead to this kind of to somebody to commit suicide. And also I'm sure sport will help to take people mind away to focus on positive or better issue. But if the condition continue to be depressing, and let's be realistic here, we have a lot of baggages from history. People not even acknowledge it yet. They don't know even what happened. Whether we are talking about indigenous community, a lot of young generation don't know what happened in their own history to their parents, their families. And on the other hand, the non-indigenous community, the same thing. They are, as we say, out of sight, out of mind, kind of. So I don't want to kind of push toward the depressing issue, but tell us about behind that suicide phenomenon. Why?
What I learned 3 years ago on the journey, as well as still learning today about some of the factors that contribute to suicidal thoughts or suicidal attempts, is a lot of it is unknown depression, domestic violence, childhood sexual abuse, residential school, addictions. There are many factors that lead up to a suicidal thought. And I believe our youth today have a lot more pressure and struggles to deal with than probably 10 years ago with social media. And having the resources available and that the youth are comfortable to reaching out for will be very helpful. But I did learn that 3 years ago on the journey, was that it was really heartbreaking and sad to hear some of the stories and experiences that communities and families had suffered with suicide, whether it was a suicide or a suicide attempt, or somebody that came forward that admitted that they were depressed and needed help.
Any statistic, any work from the government of Canada to find out, for example, numbers? Is it more among youth? Is it more among like a different age? And are you aware of that?
We are, and social media has a lot to do with raising awareness about the epidemic of suicide as well. There are isolated communities in Eastern Canada as well that suffer suicide rates, and it's startling, the statistics, and yes, a lot of it has to do with youth.
Yeah, I ask this question because, again, talking about reconciliation without knowing or acknowledging what happened first, but I'm not seeing the effort that somebody going and researching about it to take it seriously. See, at least like when you take something seriously, you start to go and do research and do statistic about it. You find out, I mean. But obviously, all this weight now on the shoulder of activists like yourself.
Words that were shared with me from a community member in Pauquachin, actually, a very young lady who's very strongly rooted in our culture and language. She shared with me that a long time ago we didn't have transportation, we didn't have the vehicles to get us from one nation to another, so that the communities would send their strongest runner as a messenger to the next nation to deliver a message. And so I believe that's what we are doing today, from the north end of Vancouver Island to the south end. You know, we have some strong runners that will take the road and support one another on the journey. So I believe that as runners we are messengers as well. And I do believe in active action.
And obviously, as we mentioned, from Tsartlip First Nation and Pauquachin First Nation, we are all, you both are from one family, the Wasanish. Seem like good representation coming to join in the run from everywhere in on the Indigenous community. So, and again, coming back, when you go to the Indigenous community in your, when you stop by one of the Indigenous community, what would you tell the youth there? Who do you meet beside the elder and the chief? Like the community itself, what the message you give to the youth or to everybody?
The message of that they are not alone, that there are resources, there is support, that it's okay to talk about those suicidal thoughts, it's okay to talk about that depression, or to even cry those tears, because tears can be healing. And hopefully with the runners running into the nation and being role models as runners as well, hopefully the youth will reach out as well and share their stories and share what their struggles really are, so that the community resources can build up to meet those youth and their needs.
I also think it's important too, like for the message that it's okay to ask that question as well too, to not feel scared to ask someone if they're thinking of suicide. I think that's really important, because I know that it can be scary to, you know, you're gonna feel that you might bring the thought to them, or, you know, so I think it's important that we bring that message as well, so you feel okay to ask someone that question, to support them, right? So.
I believe actually even your presence by itself with your message, it's with, for many people, just by that itself would help them to start talk about it. And because you know, when people think about these kind of thoughts, they are more very isolated.
Yes, creating safe places for our youth and our communities in general to be open to speak about suicide and to build their resources as they need to.
And again, about the schedule of when is going to start?
We drive up on September 16th, which is a Friday, and we begin our running journey on Saturday, September 17th, and we run for 9 days, finishing on September 25th.
And so far, how is the participation? Does it seem like a lot of participation, a lot of people participating in that?
The runners are training, and we have our committee that is meeting weekly as well, and there's a lot of communication through emails and phone calls. Family support is really big. I mean, we all have big families that we come from, so a lot of supportive families, our communities, the band offices that we work for, the companies and organizations, there's a lot of more emotional support, I believe.
Good, okay. Now, you mentioned running, it was for a practical thing, and at least in this time now, when we have the environment issue, for people to start to run or walk at least to do their thing instead of driving, at least that another thing. But coming back to sports, I know that you have a background about sport, indigenous sport. Please tell us about indigenous sport a little bit.
There are many traditional indigenous sports. There's canoe pulling, whether it's the war canoe racing or the tribal journey canoes. There's lacrosse, and running, of course, is one of the foundations, I believe, of any of the sports. I don't know if you want
Soccer.
Soccer is a real big part of our culture as well. Native soccer tournaments are held along the island throughout the year as well. The North American Indigenous Games, which is next year in Toronto, so there's a lot of youth trying out for teams, so that's a really big movement for youth and their involvement in sports as well.
Is there any reviving of this sport, like as a part of culture? You know, it's similar, it's part of your identity. This is the kind of sport indigenous people used to do or are still doing. Is there any kind of working on that sport to bring it back as it was, or improve it, or nobody really work on this issue?
I believe the war canoe races are really big. The tribal journeys happen every year, and that is bringing back the teachings to our youth as well about traditional training for the paddling and the water.
Because as you know, the language is now, it's a very important subject where many elder or many activists from the indigenous community try to make it a very top priority. And sport, it's kind of part of your identity, and it's belong to your history. Beside coming back again to your trip around, how many times so far you did, Bernice, the trip yourself?
This will be my, island journey. This will be my third time.
Your third time?
Yes, I ran the first year with Heliset Hale, and just this past February, actually, I was honored to be a member of the Wounded Warriors team, which was the same relay style as well, from Port Hardy to Victoria. Their cause, their purpose, and their journey was to raise awareness for PTSD, and I was one of the 6 runners on that team.
I'm sorry, what?
Post-traumatic stress disorder.
Okay,
yes.
Sorry, I couldn't hear very well, sorry. And, but also I noticed that it's not only about suicide prevention, also had to deal with mental health issue. So would you tell us about that?
There is underlying stigma about mental health and wellness with suicide, and it's not brought forward a whole lot for fear of being judged, I believe, or for fear of the lack of help or support. More communities now, I believe, are striving for those mental health programs, and not so much bringing in workshops or anything, but doing activities that are focused on mental health, physical health, different areas that contribute to the whole being of a First Nations person.
Yeah, obviously, I mean, it's a big factor. I mean, for somebody to commit suicide, it's actually, I don't know what to say, but it's beyond. I'm sure there is a lot of psychological issue going on and deep. So this is a way to prevent that, to go and kind of tackle this issue and know exactly what underneath. But again, coming back, when you squeeze people resources and you set them to almostly to fail in life and not to have the normal opportunity that any human being have, from education to normal housing. So of course you end up in the end with alcoholism, you end up with a lot of drug issue, you end up with kids don't know their history, their culture, far away. Yeah, it's Bernice and Angel, thank you very much for what you're doing, and I'm sure this project here, when you are finished with the run, hopefully we'll have you back here to talk about it.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Bernice. Thanks,
Thanks.
Angel. Thanks for watching this part of Indigenous Voice. Welcome back to Indigenous Voice, and we are going to continue to talk about Heliset Hale, and we have with us today Becky Wilson. Hi, Becky.
Hi.
Becky, you are from the Tsawout First Nation.
Yes, I am.
Would you please tell us a little bit first about yourself?
I am from Tsawout First Nation. I got asked to come on and help coordinate this event just a few weeks ago. My community hosted one of the largest elders gatherings for all the Aboriginal elders of BC. So we had 206 First Nations come to our community, and the logistics in that and the planning in that was so crazy. So they asked me to come and help with this event, and I offered my services because the run means that much to me, and just my experience alone with suicide in my family and with myself. It's a very, very important subject for me, and my event planning that I have, I'm dealing with a lot of the logistics for this run, so it's very important to stay in contact with communities, stay on top of emails, and just help coordinate transportation and accommodation and the things that the runners are going to need along the way. So I've been working nonstop on that for the past few weeks, and just getting to know the runners too is very amazing because they all bring their own gifts to the table, and the committee is amazing. We have supportive communities. The Wasanich people are behind the runners like 100%, and I'm just very eager to be a part of such an amazing event, and I can't wait for it to start.
Yeah, especially when you have the background of a community planner, is that correct?
Yeah, event planning and just organizing, yeah.
And just go again about the schedule of the run. When it's going to start, for the map of it in general, if you tell us a little bit about it, please.
Well, we do have a map on our website. HelisetHale.com is our website, and it shows the communities that we'll be stopping in. We are finding more and more communities are adding to our run, like they want us to stop at their community. So right now I think we're at a full 9, and there's one stretch of the community we'll be visiting 3 communities in one day, and I think that would be September 20th to the 22nd. We'll be doing, I think, 4 communities within those couple days. So we will be starting our journey up the island on September 16th, and then we will be leaving Port Hardy on September 17th in the morning. They're going to do a big send-off for us, like at 9 or 10 in the morning. So that's where we're going to start. And then the 27th, we're actually going to be running into Pauquachin First Nation this time. And 2013, they finished in Tsartlip, so Pauquachin has graciously offered to host the end of the run for Heliset Hale. We have 2 Pauquachin First Nation members running this year, so the Wasanich Nation is almost represented with all of our runners.
Nice,
Yeah, so.
And from the Tsawout First Nation, there is some, I'm sure, participation there.
Yeah, we do have 2 male runners. Our 2 male runners, John Sampson and Leon LaFortune, are Tsawout First Nation members, and they will be joining the run. Leon's first year this year, but John did the run in 2013. Yeah.
And actually, when I visited the website, I heard about Leonard LaFortune. It's the whole project sometimes change people. I've given them, they are so excited about it, and I read that clearly in his words about what he feel about the Heliset Hale.
Yeah, it does bring hope to community members just to know that they're not alone in the fight against suicide. I was on a committee, it was called Gathering Strength, probably a good 5 years back. We went to Ontario for a suicide awareness workshop, and the stats that we learned there was that when one person takes their life from suicide, there's 10 other people that are thinking about it. And that statistic alone hit me in the heart, because we've lost so many people in our communities, and it's like that statistic is just huge. Like, so when you lose a life to suicide, there's 10 other people out there that are thinking about it. And if we can get the message across about the services that are provided out there, the help that there is, the hope that the runners have and they carry with them along the run, gives them that strength to reach out for that help. Because the mental illness in communities, especially First Nations communities, is often not spoken of, and like the word suicide alone was kind of like a hush word, like you weren't allowed to say it, or it's just a very touchy subject for our people. But now it's coming out into the open, and you could say that word suicide, and you can kind of target the group and target the people that are suffering with mental illness and try and help them. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I took on this role, is because I want to help people and get the support that they need and just be there for them, even if it's just to listen. That's a big, huge thing, just to sit there and listen to someone.
And it's great that there is this you're making that connection between mental issue and health and suicide.
Yes.
And, so in a workshop you do, for example, about that issue, what the workshop consists of? What do you do in the workshop?
Well, the workshops were basically
For suicide prevention.
Suicide prevention and intervention. They had actually one segment in there about Indigenous people, and just the way that they targeted that specific workshop was kind of off for me. It was I stood up to the guy at the workshop, actually. We were like, there's health professionals there, there's Indigenous people there, there's First Nations there, and it was actual First Nations from Manitoba, I believe, that was heading up the workshop, but his take on the whole thing was very wrong. Like, he was targeting, like, oh, you guys should be doing this and not this, and you guys need to be more stern about this and this. And I was like, okay, well, all these people are in here for the same reason. We're here to prevent, and you're making it sound like everyone's bad except for First Nations people. I said it's not only First Nations people that are suffering and stuff. So that workshop could use a little bit more, I think, structure. I didn't actually go to the next year's one because of my job, but they are starting to come, I think, along with, because it's a provincial workshop for all of BC, and they host it in different places all over Canada. So I think they're coming a long way with those types of workshops and just getting information out there, especially with the statistics, and they're keeping those up to date now, whereas before it was every 3 or 4 years. But now I think they're keeping the statistics yearly, so people know that the problem is there.
But who does this statistic? Who keeps the statistic? Is it a grassroots kind of work, or a government, or
I believe it's a government one. I can't even really remember. It was 4 or 5 years ago that I went, so I still have some of the stuff at home, but I don't really recall where the statistics came from, and yeah.
Yeah, because it's the responsibility for any government, especially when you are taking over the land of the indigenous people. They have a responsibility. It's not like it's their issue and they have to deal with it.
Yeah.
So, but Becky, thank you very much for coming on the show here. And we'll again, the date you said in the 16th of September start the run.
We will be driving like the runners, the
Fort
6
Hardy.
runners, and then we have support staff. So I believe there's 17 altogether that will be going up. There's like 3 vehicles. We're trying to get an RV. So we'll be leaving Saanich on the 16th up to Port Hardy.
Okay.
But the run won't start until the 17th.
As I told Bernice and Angel, we'll follow up on the subject because this is, again, an important issue for many people, and many people lost loved one because of whether if, it's suicide or mental health issue. Again, thanks a lot, Becky, coming on the show, and thanks for watching this segment of Indigenous Voice. Thank you.